Good morning, everyone. This is a second part to a series of webinars that we are doing with relevant topics to the unprecedented times of the pandemic. My name is John Crane. I'll be the moderator today. I'm a financial advisor for Edward Jones. I was in the turf industry prior to doing this and have over 36 years experience working with you guys. I'm looking forward and humbled to work with a panel of sports turf managers, as well as a professor and educator from Virginia Tech. And our first panelist today will be Jesse Pritchard. He is the sports turf manager at UVA. He has been working there for over 18 years. He manages about 20 acres of sports turf and has 4 staff members. You can see his budget as well as the contact information under here. Next, we have Matt Austin from James City County. He is also a VSTMA board member and graduate of The Ohio State University.
Thank you, John.
Put that in there. He has 21 years experience and manages over 86 acres of sports turf, as well as general turf in James City County. He has 6 full-time employees with sports turf and 28 members total in his staff, including himself. And lastly, we have Dr. Mike Goatley, who is the professor and extension turfgrass specialist at Virginia Tech. He is the former past president of the National STMA and current VSTMA board member advisor for us. He is a graduate of the University of Kentucky and Virginia Tech. He has over 31 years experience. So today we plan to talk about the effects of the pandemic and how it's affected all of us. As we all realize, we're all in the same boat today. And I know myself has seen my 401k go down, as well as being concerned about my family and health and the overall job market out there as well. And we've all been working hard to try to work through this together. As we all know, the grass grows whether we're on vacation or not. So I want to open up the first question regarding the effects of the pandemic. And I'm going to open this up to start with Jesse Pritchard. What kind of staff changes have you made to accommodate for the need of social distancing?
All right, great. Well, thank you, John, for hosting us and doing this for our members. Yeah, it's been interesting. We started off when this whole thing happened, I guess, let's say it started March 16th or so, when the NBA canceled and the ACC made the decision to suspend play, at least just suspend play at that time. You know, our baseball team was in a bus on the way to Pittsburgh and was half an hour from their stadium on Thursday evening for a weekend series at Pitt. And they turned around half an hour from the Pittsburgh campus and came back because they got the word while they were out. The next 2 weeks, we did not work at all. Actually, that's why we came in on Monday, sprayed things out, and the following 2 weeks, we didn't work at all. Through communication with my boss, and he supports us well and understands the need for us as essential employees. The university has considered the grounds crew essential. With that being said, we sprayed our ryegrass out and have mostly focused on common areas, quite honestly, over the past 7 to 9 weeks. Starting next week, more than likely, we will go full-time. Right now, we are working 3 days a week. We are all working at the same time. I've found it to be more efficient. Everybody has an individual mower, weed eater, cart, it's theirs. We choose the best 3 days of the week. And if it's going to be, if Monday, Wednesday, Thursday are the best 3 days, then those are the 3 days that we work. We eat lunch outside if the weather's good, but we haven't gone as far as others have in Our shifts are still starting at the same time. So we haven't gone as far as others. But right now, 3 days a week for my staff is what we're doing.
So do you alter that staff as far as, are you dividing them up and certain people work 3 days different than the other 3 days?
No, we're all working together and using the same past 3 days. I felt it was better to do that and be able to, I don't want to bring 2 guys in on a rain day where they can't get anything done just because they're scheduled to work Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday this week. So we're trying to use our time as efficiently as we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jesse. Matt, would you like to tell us what you've done to accommodate for social distancing and also the emotions through this whole thing with your staff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good morning, John. Good morning, everybody on the panel, and thank you for having me do this for you guys. Since I do have 28 people, I'm going to try my best to separate athletics with the rest of my grounds and landscaping crew. So I'll jump back and forth, so follow with me, since it is a unique situation of what I have. I'm going to explain the setup so you know where I'm coming from. We do have 28. They're all full-time staff members. Broken down into, this is 28 including myself and my crew foreman. We're broken down into 6 different crews, ranging from 3 to 6 member crews. They are used to riding 2 to a vehicle, sometimes 3 to a vehicle. In the past, we have always met, all 28 of us, in one location first thing in the morning. And then from there, we branch out through all of our 27 linear miles of area throughout the county. They all 28 of them shared the same locker room. They shared the same punch clock, everything. We were all together. So, and then just like Jesse was saying, around that week of March 10th, 11th, 12th, when the panic started setting in, and we were just running around trying to figure out how are we going to separate our entire staff. When it first came down from admin on what was going to go on, we were automatically and very quickly listed as essential. And so we were expected to work 40 hours a week. The first scenario we thought of and we agreed upon in one day was we were going to work 3 12-hour shifts. Half the crew was going to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The other crew Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That lasted all of about a day until reality set in, and we were like, there's no way we're working 12-hour shifts from dark to dark and being effective. So my foreman and I, we really sat down with a couple of the leads and try to talk it through. We came up, we're working 4 10-hour shifts. Half the crew comes in on Monday. We overlap on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then the other crew comes in on Friday. This has worked out for the last 7 weeks, but that still didn't. It still did not figure out what we're going to do with our vehicles. So instead of everybody meeting at the shop at 6:30 in the morning in one location, we split the crew in 2, the athletic crew and our stadium and law enforcement crew is what we call them based on the areas they take care of. They started meeting remotely out in the county at the stadium itself. One of that crew, they came in at 6, the other one came in at 6:15. That left me with 4 crews that were still meeting at the shop. So we started a staggered start. We had a 6 o'clock crew, a 6:15, a 6:30, and a 6:45. And everybody worked 10-hour shifts through there. The crew that was meeting remotely, they did not require as many vehicles, so we can all get to 1 to a vehicle. But everybody in our that was meeting there at our shop at Tuning, we required extra vehicles. So we scrounged up 9 vehicles throughout the county. And these are all like inspectors that were working remotely or teleworking. And ever since then, we have all been 1 to a vehicle. We do not share our vehicles. We do have a couple employees in cop cars. They're unmarked because they were surplus. So they've enjoyed themselves riding around. So
I bet.
Yes.
Turning on the sirens and pulling people over and driving
Yeah,
fast.
well, we tried that out one time. We'll admit we jumped at it to practice a little bit and play, but yeah, it has been interesting. All of my leads, they have tablets, so they were able to clock in and clock out all their staff out in the field. And then obviously we supply masks, hand sanitizers. We leave them doors wide open to eliminate the touching and everything. My biggest challenge has been rain days, and I don't know what it's doing out west, but here on the coast, we've been getting pounded with rain. And in our nature, in our line of work, rain usually combines everybody together. So I've been lucky enough to kind of have them come in late and do teleworking on computers at home and go from there.
All right, great. The next question I have is, what are you doing to maintain the morale of the staff through these uncertain times? And Jesse, I'm going to revert back to you.
Yeah, I'd say be thankful, be grateful. No, I'm kidding. But a little bit. Look, it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge. I mean, this is going to be a short, sweet answer. We haven't done a lot. I mean, other than, me being thankful for them coming in. And quite honestly, if Friday is one of the days that we work and it's nice, it's hard for me, we may get out just a little bit early. I know last Friday was beautiful. I don't think anybody was working on Friday. It was so nice. So that's what we're doing, is just they might get off a little bit early on Friday.
Matt, would you like to share what you guys are doing?
Yeah, with my large staff, I mean, really what I've found is just communicating with them and everything that comes down from our administration, which is a lot. For this first couple of weeks, I was getting 4, 5, 6 emails of all the changes and the uncertainty and everything. Instead of just compounding that to myself and my foreman, we were constantly meeting with the staff and the crew and telling them exactly what was going on. I kind of took the approach in the beginning with most of the staff that the stuff is for real. Please do everything you can to secure your family, secure yourselves while you're coming in at work. We have been very flexible with their schedules. I mentioned that 4 10-hour shifts, but I do have a number of mothers on the crew that have children, and now that they're going to school online, 10-hour shifts of them working till 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then at home doing schoolwork with their kids was tough. So I've allowed a few of them to go back to 5/8, and basically just as long as they can adhere to the social distance and stay away from most of the other crew, then I'm fine with what we figured out.
Great. The next question that I have is, what have you done to control the emotional response of your staff when making these changes? Knowing many of the departments were able to stay at home or telework, how have your superiors considered rewarding your crew for keeping the sports fields and grounds maintained while non-essential departments are being paid to stay at home? And Matt, I'm going to refer back to you on this one.
Okay. Well, I'll be flat out honest with you. It has been very difficult. The moment this went down back in that week in March, the service authority, which is essentially our public works, is right next to my office, and their staff immediately were working 1 week and were off 1 week and getting paid for that week they were off. And I had to tell that to my staff, and they were working 40-hour weeks and obviously not getting off. It was tough for them to swallow for a little bit. And then I was telling them what the neighboring municipalities were doing. I know I heard that some crews were getting paid double because they were essential. They were getting paid double time to go out and do that. basically, I just said, hey, guys, we're all in this together. We'll be our own grounds crew. Just put your nose to the ground. I'll do everything I can to make sure that we continue working. And just don't worry about what the other staff and departments are going, because they might be doing, they might have chose one thing, but we don't know what their situation are. So we try to, after about a week, I think all the filtering and all the outside noise kind of calmed down. Rewards, our park staff, which a number of the parks employees were furloughed back at the end of March. They were trying to find ways to keep busy. So they had formed a committee and were supplying box lunches to all of our departments that were deemed essential. So every Wednesday, our crews were getting box lunches from a local lunch place around. That was very nice. There were some prepaid Visa gift cards that showed up that I got to hand out to all the staff. That was very nice. That came from our administration. So they are thinking ahead and really doing what's right for the employees. I tell you, after about 2 or 3 weeks of them getting used to the 10-hour shifts and realizing that they all had side work and having 3-day weekends was kind of a blessing, and they got used to it. And once they realized that there's nobody at our parks and our athletic fields and at the schools, their jobs were a lot easier to do because they weren't having to deal with the children and the regular public. So their moods changed, and they're appreciative on the hard work they've done, and they've actually been in a very good mood through all of this.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Matt. Jesse, I know you've got other departments on the campus at UVA that probably are sitting at home, some facility workers, and you're a facility guy. So can you share with me a little bit what's going on there?
Yeah, just like Matt said, I mean, this was the challenge in the beginning, and from the very beginning, I was very strong about getting our employees essential and getting them working. And we kind of worked side by side with the facilities management / shop. And those guys are not deemed essential right now. And we kind of work hand in hand, right? So they're sitting at home, let's say 4.5 days a week. And we're in 3 days a week, about to be in 5 days a week. And they're all getting paid the same, or my guys might be getting less, right? And that was a challenge, a tremendous challenge. But I just kept preaching to them that the catastrophe of if we do not play football this fall will bring you don't even want to know what that brings. I mean, the Florida State athletic director has a quote of "God help us if there's no football," and that's the truth. So from the day one, I wanted my guys to be putting down time worked and not emergency time off from the governor or from our president, because there will be furloughs if this continues for much longer. Our university hospital just announced 70% furloughs to most all hospital staff last week. At that point, it kind of hit home, I think, that they understood why I was fighting to have them in. And yeah, it's a challenge, but they understand now. But from day one, I fought to have them working, and they slowly have bought in.
Well, kudos to both of you guys for having the high-level overview of that perspective and be able to focus and keep your guys working. I do have several clients, and namely in the medical field as well as in the dental field and in the restaurant field, that are out of jobs right now. So kudos for you guys for keeping them motivated and focused. So the next question is, and Matt kind of came up with this question, is no one shoe fits all. Since early March, how have you communicated with other sports field facilities, neighboring communities, and departments to see what they are doing to cope with this pandemic? So, Matt, since you came up with this question, I'm going to throw it to you first.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, it was those first 2 weeks, and I keep referring back to that week of March. We look back here, it's like March 9th all the way through about March 20th when just everything, when all of our high school sports were shutting down, all of our athletic fields and everything were all shutting down. So all the social distancing started. I was in contact with 2 separate golf course superintendents that neighbor us, 4 municipalities and 2 universities. And we're talking daily. And it seemed like what one of us would do, we would all follow suit. And it was never one leading the other. I know when I had that idea of 312s, I was on the phone with 2 of the other municipalities. And 2 days later, they called up, how's the 312s doing? We switched that. So we're doing something else now. Well, whatever we were doing or whatever Newport News or York County or anybody near us was doing, we were relaying back and forth. So we kind of teamed up and made sure that we were texting each other every day of what our changes were, who was open, who was closed in terms of their parks. I remember there was a time on that, I think it was March 10th, my parks department, which I'm not parks, I'm general services. So we actually maintain the parks facility for the parks department. They were calling me for all of our contacts to the other municipalities to find out what they were doing with their parks. And whenever one of the localities would shut down, it seemed like a crowd of people were coming to our boat ramps, to our fields, to everything until we shut down. So it was tough. I mean, we were on the phone a lot. It's kind of going quiet in the last couple of weeks because everybody's kind of settled into this, and now we have our own normal troubles and problems we're dealing with. I was talking with the superintendents. I used to be a superintendent, but have been out of that for a while, and they were dealing with more agronomic stuff on the best way to spray out a ryegrass immediately, maybe using non-selectives instead of a selective, getting tips from them on what they were doing, and so on and so forth. But mainly really just communicating all the time with everybody to try to figure out how we can all work together in this.
Well, Jesse, I know you're kind of unique in the fact that you're a higher end university. How did you share with other places around you?
You know, the university is basically shut down. So amongst us, I mean, this place is a ghost town. I mean, we're basically the only people in. Even facilities management grounds, I think they're working like 1 out of 4 weeks and had divided their crew up. So there's basically nobody here. You know, like all of us do, you know, I communicate with my peers mostly, whether that's, you know, a lot of schools from the ACC, SEC. We talked, and it's kind of amazing. Everything happened so quickly. But kind of like what Matt said is we all almost are all doing about the same thing in a certain version. Like we basically all come up with about half-time work to 3 days a week. Almost everybody is doing that. There are a few universities that still went full-time. But yeah, you know, I called about 10 guys the other day, and you know, 3 or 4 of them answered, and we were all doing about the same thing, 3 days a week or 3 half days, or splitting your crew up 3 days. So it's the same as always, talking with your STMA buddies, and whether it's agronomics or now whether it's work schedules, right? So yeah. I mean, that's basically what we did.
Okay. The next question is, was it mandated to close your fields to public access? And how have you handled the field closures? So Matt, I'm going to throw that back to you.
Okay. Yeah. So, like I taught before, we're split. We take care of all of our park sites, which have some large athletic field complexes. But I also have 3 high schools, 4 middle schools, and 2 elementary schools that have very large sports complex on them too. So, and the parks personnel and the school personnel do not communicate on a regular basis in how they operate. So when schools were deemed closed for that 2-week period and they determined that all athletics were shut down, I think right around that March 10th time too, literally the entire school division left. The basketball was still bouncing on the court and it was a ghost town. And even the ADs, everybody were gone. No communication at all to the ground staff at all. So we were literally left to go out and figure everything on our own on the school side. The parks, meanwhile, they were still there. They did not close their fields right off the bat. So here I am sitting with all of our schools, they closed. So we immediately ran out and grabbed all the soccer goals, the cross goals, field hockey goals, locked them up. We shut down our Musco systems. We closed down all their electronic access to all the lights. Locked everything we could, and that was it. Well, all that did was within 2 days of the high school and the middle school coaches realizing their fields were shut down, I started getting calls. Hey, can we come up to the athletic complex and practice on those fields up there? And that was really difficult because we just funneled the whole county right to 3 of our big complexes. So we were on the horn for 3 days with the parks people. What are you guys doing? And they were waiting on, I think at that time the VRPS was trying to work together amongst throughout the state on how they were handling everything together. I think on that Monday or Tuesday, they finally shut down all of our athletic fields on the park side. The park staff was excellent in helping us. We had dozens and dozens of soccer goals we had to move off the fields and chained up. We did post all of those with signs out in the fields. We posted it all over social media, sent it out to all of our user groups and all of our coaches. So it was well documented that all the parks fields were shut down, and we really didn't have too much problem of anybody going out there besides Dad and little Johnny out throwing toss, which we were still somewhat allowing. I have noticed recently with the weather changing in the last 2 weeks where we've caught our football teams out practicing without their coaches. And mainly they said, well, all the high school and all the school fields are not marked. We didn't know. And I think half of that was they were trying to pull one over on it, but I think the other half was they were being truthful because as of today, it's now been 7 or 8 weeks. The schools have still not returned. All the athletics ADs, they were told to stay at home and not come back. So all last week I was working on with some of the school staff that had access to the budget, working on signs, posting throughout the fields, and working on them to pass that word out to all their athletic directors. Another thing that really kind of threw us for a pickle was the tracks around those fields were still open. Our tennis courts were still open. The best thing we could do is work with our police department and just kind of tell them, hey, if they're fine to run around the track, they're fine to use the tennis courts as long as they're not grouping together. I've kind of enforced or trained my staff and talked with all of our staff about if you meet people out there, we took the approach just to kind of educate them and inform them and tell them the reason why we closed these fields was mainly for their own safety. But two, they were, since they're not being monitored, nobody knows when they're wet or when they're dry, when they're playable, when they're safe. So it was a safety issue also.
All right. Jesse, what have you experienced and how have you solicited other departments to help you?
Well, we are obviously contained, unlike Matt's situation, right? Much more contained. by the middle of that first main week, we had locked up everything. Our track stayed open that first weekend somehow, but the decision was quickly made that we have to lock everything up. All of our tennis courts, all of our athletic fields, all of our facilities. But again, everything's fenced and pretty tight. That didn't stop those 30 or 10 or 20 or 30 students that were still on grounds from climbing fences and going out and trying to get workouts in. So then very quickly we drug all of our what seems like 152 soccer goals, lacrosse goals, field hockey goals into the middle of one of our synthetic fields and chained them all up together to where they can't be used. So everything is pretty much closed. I've used law enforcement once. That's when a brazen 60-year-old man saw me and climbed directly over our 8-foot tall fence to go run on the track. So then I called UVPD and said, I need you guys to deal with this guy. So other than that, because he was obnoxious, other than that, it's been pretty simple, really, especially now that we're in exams and kids are pretty much gone. We're not going to get pressure.
I understand. And Matt, I loved your analogy or the description of the basketball still bouncing as everybody left the schools. That was a good one. So,
Yep.
All right. So now we're going to talk about cost cutting and efficiency moving forward. Knowing your budget will likely be reduced, how have you gone about selecting the most important things that offer you the maximum results? And I'm going to throw this back to Jesse because I think this was his question.
Yeah. Well, so I mentioned earlier, I mean, it started on that first Monday, the 16th. I mean, we sprayed out our ryegrass. March 16th, which probably will never happen again in my career, I hope. But it really worked out well this year in particular. Bermuda grass survived exceptionally. I don't think we'll have to resod anything. And we haven't really pushed our athletic fields at all. We're letting them do their thing as they want to. They've got pre-emergent with fertilizer on them, and that's pretty much all they've had. So we aren't doing anything like that. I used the webinar from last week when with Dr. Aston talking about growth regulators. I mean, this past week we went out and put 44 ounces of Primo to the acre on all of our common call fescue areas, all of them. So we hope, and we did higher rates on all fence rows to hopefully cut down on weed eating. I personally have been asked to take a 5% pay cut, and I voluntarily did that, along with about 50 or 60 other upper level people in the athletic department. I have been asked to basically spend nothing for the rest of this fiscal year. I can do basic things. I can go out and get tire fixed. I can go out, but just because I have $85,000 left over in my budget doesn't mean I can go and buy whatever I want. Only what's absolutely necessary, and I get approval from my boss to do that. I've been asked to give a 5, 10, and 20% reduction. What that looks like for my operating budget for next fiscal year. And let me tell you, when you're already pretty thin, a 20% cut is a lot. Like, you really have to, you start getting into some meat when you start cutting 20%. and I'll speak to to athletics budgets just a little bit. Football accounts for 60 to 75% of every Power 5 athletic department. So let's just use $100 million as a nice round number. That's pretty easy. That's $60 to $75 million in revenue if we do not play football this fall.
Wow.
So 20% won't even be the beginning of it if that happens. So I think the people that survive this are going to be the people that give and also do more, because those are going to be the people that have to survive. So those are some of the things that we've done. We will not get into any big projects probably, and we'll do light fertilization, heavy growth regulator. We'll spend money on tines this year instead of sand probably. Because sand's a huge expense, and met a few $1,000 in tines, we can get a lot done with verification. I could go into a lot more, and we probably will, but I'll let Matt take over on what he's doing.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, just like Jesse just said, last week I was working on a 5, 10, 15, and 20% reduction scenario. The hardest thing that I have is we don't know when sports are going to start back up. So I literally had to do 4 scenarios with sports and 4 scenarios without sports. As you see in the beginning, my entire budget, not just athletics, is $2 million. Out of that $2 million, 900 plus thousand is my salaries, overtime, and benefits. So my first question was, does that 20% only come out of my operating, my $1 million, or is that out of $2 million? Well, it was out of everything. So all last week, all of my scenarios, I pulled $1 million away. I was refusing to go after any of my staff, and they're already one of the lowest paid out of the entire county. I said I could not get taking any money out of that budget itself. So literally, I'm looking at every 5% out of my budget's $90,000, up to about $400,000, roughly $400,000 is what my 20% was looking at. So it was very, very eye-opening. Immediately, we've got a very good equipment replacement program. John well knows we got a lot of red Toros sitting there. So that was accounting for about $150,000 to $200,000 a year. Immediately we bumped it back a year. It wasn't the best idea, but we've got very well taken care of with our fleet staff equipment, so we can go out another year. All the projects that I had planned for this year and going into next fall, we're now going back in-house with those, and that's all based on athletics not occurring for the next couple months. I had some wiring, new wiring put in for an old irrigation system that was all taken out. Another eye-opener was I tried to buy $2,400 of fertilizer about a month ago. I still have not gotten that approved, and I've sent 7 different emails, justifications on what we're doing and why we're doing it. I've done my homework on there, and I'm still waiting for the final approval from all the way to the top. Our nutrients, I can say they're roughly, we're all warm season down here at Complex, 100%. We've reduced our nitrogen levels from 4.5 pounds down to less than 2. So basically there's $10,000 in fertilizer lopped right off the top, for just this growing season now. And then just like Jesse said about our growth regulators, back in February, we had already planned on using growth regulators anyway. So I kind of had a little foresight of what we were going to do into this pandemic. And we stockpiled all kinds of growth regulators while our budgets weren't really being looked at and persecuted that hard. So I'm well ready to go going into the season with that. and I'll explain more on some of these other questions on what we're doing.
Great. Appreciate you sharing that, Matt. So our next question is, with the sports fields being closed over the last month and a half, what opportunities have you capitalized on to complete projects while your sports fields were closed? Jesse, I'm going to throw this to you because I think you brought up this question.
Yeah, man, we definitely got opportunities, right? I mean, obviously, looking at your pictures right there, how great would it be if I could go out and phrase mow all my fields right now? If I could spend some of that money that I have in my budget, I 100% would. We'll do some sodding in-house, so that we may or may not have time for in a normal year. Our areas on our baseball field that shade out real bad, we can resod those ourselves. I'm going to try, I mean, this gets a little higher level. Our infield clay has a pretty good turfus, has gotten into that top inch and broken down pretty heavily. And we get a little bit, I don't know, kind of call it a muck layer on nice good clay that gets real soft and it chips very easy rather than being a straight clay. So we're going to strip, I think, about an inch of infield clay off, add a truck or two of clay, and we're going to do this ourselves and get back to clean clay so we can have a much better playing surface. Ordinarily, we wouldn't really have time to do that this time. Well, especially not this time of year. Yeah, other than that, like I told you, we're just going to put a lot of metal in the ground and spend our whole summer really trying to get this grass as healthy as we can so we are ready when the kids return.
Well, Matt, would you like to share, and thank you, Jesse, would you like to share a little bit of what you're doing or what you have been able to do with the field being closed?
Yeah, the same. I think Jesse and I, sounds like we were spraying out our ryegrass the exact same Monday when all this went down. That's why I was talking with some superintendents, because I actually sprayed it out with a non-selective burn down instead of a traditional transition out product, and it worked pretty well. Normally, we cannot get out and do any chloration on our fields until after high school sports are over, which is usually second week of June. We have already core aerated all of our 86 acres of athletic fields, and now we're going through with shatter tines on our deep tine, and we're going back over it again. So our huge soccer complex, 16 acres, we're on our third round of running those shatter tines across it, just keeping them open. Just like Jesse said too, we reduced all of our nutrients, and we're letting the coring tines and the less play do all the work for us. A couple of cool things that guys have been working on. I said I had 6 of us, and I have a lot of irrigation systems. Normally, it's a spring startup is just firing up, making sure all of our arcs are going and all the heads are turning, and we're off to the next thing. Well, now they spent more time with it. We do have WeatherTrack systems, control systems that have GPS capability. So the guys are actually out with their smartphones, and we're actually running GPS coordinates for each one of our valves and our flow sensors in there. So, and they're labeled exactly what zone they're operating. So in the future, it should be a whole lot easier when we got problems out in the field. Literally, we're top dressing infields already, grass infields. We're actually, one of the cool things we did last week, we started looking at one of the BMPs that we actually have a wet well in and we pull out of. I started looking at the standpipe on there, and I found an extra valve on the standpipe, and started getting the stormwater people out there. Said, can we raise the level of this BMP? And they're looking back into the diagram, and I think we can. Basically, I just saved myself about 500,000 gallons of water by raising this level up about 2 foot. So in times of drought and everything, we have a little more water capacity out there. And I never even would have looked at this because I never had time to go in and really investigate something like that. So there has been, we've had more time to really look at our fields and do some special projects.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Matt. And Jesse, kudos to both of you guys for making good use of your time while the fields are closed. So the next question is, knowing your sports fields will reopen, how have you planned for increased activity with the possibility of multiple sports seasons being played at the same time? And I'm going to put this back to Matt because I think he's probably got less control over this than Jesse does.
Yeah, you're exactly right, John. I pretty much have no control over it. We're James City County and the city of Williamsburg. We're all based on our tourism, and any chance they're going to have an outside soccer group come in to make some money for our hotels, the floodgates are going to open. If there is a silver lining out of the pandemic, I'm thankful every day that we haven't had sports for one reason is it's been wet and cool and our Bermuda grass is just sitting there. And if we had sports out there playing on it, our fields would be a mess right now. So it's the only positive note I can think out of all of that. Since we are warm season and all of our sports playing in the middle of the summer, we can actually get them to recover pretty darn quick. So I'm not really concerned about that. And realistically, I don't know how much we can really handle. Everybody knows July and August down here in the Tidewater is just humid and hot. So I just can't see that many different sports playing all the way through the summer, like what they're thinking. But I have been working with our park staff and a couple other municipalities just to understand when they're going to open, if they even know. We've been trying our best to spread the play out through all the fields, but all of our play is concentrated at the sports complex where we're going to have the field day because that's where all of our fields are. So we really don't know. We're just playing it day by day on when we get an opening, and then we're told that we're going to meet up and talk about it then. So bottom line is I don't have much of a plan except for just trying to get dense turf right now as quickly as possible.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good plan to me. And it looks like you've already kind of stimulated the waters with the parks people as far as having a conversation about it once you get to that point. So at least you're being proactive. Jesse, I know y'all have a lot of sports programs where you have camps and everything. How is it affecting you guys at UVA?
Well, we have shut everything down until July 1 at this point. And I suspect it'll go longer than that. Our AD, Colin Williams, has shared some information that they've even thought about, if we don't have a fall season, they floated the idea of having fall in the spring along with spring sports. And we're watching this on a Zoom, and my employees all text me at the same time. There is 0% chance that we can handle every single sport at the same time. And they're right. I mean, we're minimally staffed as it is, right? Like, when there's no fat to cut, you get into a time like this, and it doesn't work to be asked to do too much more. We'll see. I think playing a later football season is a legitimate possibility. I think you could see a November, December, January, February football season, which presents challenges, right? Because the grass isn't growing, and we'd be almost a little bit more like an NFL season in that regard. And on every one of those fields, you see thick cut sod on the center of those fields, and that's a reality if we try to combine seasons and do multiple sports. So it's just like Matt said, it's an unknown. We're all waiting and just hoping for the best. And yeah, we're trying to grow grass as best we can because we know when they come back, it's going to be game on. So, yeah, hopefully things get back to normal sooner rather than later.
Well, kudos to both of you guys for being proactive with the aerification and things that are going to impact and improve the fields and keep them alive through extra play. and Jesse, I know that your school relies heavily on the revenue, as well as Matt's county on the revenue of the hotels and people that support the athletics in your county. So we'll go to the next question. How have you adjusted your fertility or pest management plan to reflect the lack of field uses to adhere to the request by your superiors to cut back on maintenance dollars spent? And I think, Jesse, you shared, and Matt, you too, about spraying out the ryegrass, but, and I might lean on Dr. Goatley, if you're awake back there, to chime in here shortly on this question. So, Matt, I'm going to throw this to you.
Yeah, I'll quickly run down stuff that we've done. Like you said, we sprayed out our ryegrass. We didn't have to continue to mow it, and we can get a healthier stand of Bermuda grass. Like I mentioned, we stockpiled growth regulators. We plan on doing that all the way through the season. That fertilizer purchase I was referring to was a polymer-coated fertilizer. Originally, it was only supposed to go out on 8 to 10 acres, and it was going to go out at a 2.5 pound to N rate, and it was supposed to feed for about 3 months. I have since reduced that. It's going out at a pound to N, and it's going to go over about 28 acres. And we're going to watch and see how it releases. And I've been working with the company on stats and at that lower rate, see what it does. We're literally just focusing any fertilization practice on the recovery of our wear areas. We're not even fertilizing outside fields. We're not fertilizing our practice fields. We're letting the tines do the work there. Our reel mower height, we're keeping the reels going on some of the fields. We raised it up to 1 inch. And then all of our other fields are rotary, and they've gone up to 1 3/4 inches to 2 inches, depending on the field, to try not to stress them out. We're trying to reduce the water needs on those fields, which in terms to run the water is electricity cost. I don't know. I know a lot of other people have had many issues with POA control this year. We're one of them. POA is rampant throughout our fields. Some of it's my fault on what we did wrong in choice of nozzles, but other of it is just, it's just bad. Instead of, we would be out trying to spray them out one more time and we don't have play, so I'm just let that transition out with the heat we have down here. And no overseeding in the fall on any of our high school fields has already been put into place too.
Thank you, Matt. Jesse, what have you done on your fields?
Well, I guess I'm fortunate that I happened to put in a large order for supplies to last me the spring and early summer in January. So I took stock of those. Like Matt, I also thought Primo was going to be the toilet paper for groundskeepers. So I stockpiled on that stuff immediately. Turns out that may not be the case. But yeah, so I have, many gallons of Primo. Unlike the step that Matt has taken, they're going to allow us to work 40 hours a week. And if we don't have sports, that means we have an adequate amount of time to do things. So I've taken a different approach on fertilization and not going extreme slow release, as that product is per pound of nitrogen extremely expensive when compared to soluble fertilizers. So with the time that we have, we're going to take the approach of we're going to spoon feed with soluble fertilizers because they're extremely economical and we don't have the acreage that Matt has. So, we can go out and put 1/10 of a pound of N on Monday in a sprayer and add whatever else we want to in it and do that based on clipping rates, basically similar to greens management, right? Like if we've got a lot of clippings, we're going to keep we're not going to spray that 1/10 of a pound the following week or whatever. And as they die down, we'll go ahead and put that back out. And I can make the soluble fertilizer that I have here last quite a while by doing that. So I'm not saying one's better than the other, but they're two separate solutions to the same answer. So,
Well, it sounds like to me that with both of your budgets being cut, that you might have to save some of that fertilizer for next physical year. But Dr. Goatley, would you like to chime in on what the impact is on the turf as far as what's the minimum fertility that the turf would need when there's no play on it?
Well, first of all, I like what both Jesse and Matt just said, because it just shows what the possibilities are in terms of managing turf grass. There's so many ways to do it right and ways to do it wrong. And it's a reminder for us under these types of situations just how plastic turf grass is, and that we don't want it to get away from us, but we don't have to maintain it at game-ready conditions 24/7, 365. And I think quite often we kind of get loaded into that trap. We're very good at what we do. We have very high expectations. One thing I'm seeing is people telling me, let's use this as a chance to kind of recalibrate my expectations as well as my clientele's expectations. In terms of the fertility, concentrate on those areas that it needs it, and keep mowing those grasses. But as a rule of thumb, what Virginia enacted 3 or 4 years ago with what we follow as our standard nitrogen fertility programming of about 0.7 pounds of N per 1,000 for active growing month, somewhere in that range is going to give the plant what it needs. But again, the plant doesn't have those types of needs if it's not being heavily trafficked. The situations that do require more care are going to be like in Jesse's his sports fields that are built on sand. They certainly require extra attention to do that. But there's so many ways to do this and do this right. Everything that I've heard that you guys have said this morning, again, lots of different ways to do this, and every single one of the proposals you all have, it's going to work.
Well, thank you, Dr. Goatley. And the last question before we open this up, and I know we're running a little bit short on time, is what have we learned through this process to make us a better steward of our budget and resources? And Jesse, I'm going to throw this back to you.
Yeah, I thought about this. I didn't think about it hard enough. I think it's real easy to just say, oh, I got to have this. I need this. I can't do my job without this. And I think we're all going to find that that may not necessarily be true. You can get it done with fewer resources, fewer people, less support. And I think most of us have always been doing that. This is just an accelerant, so to speak, of what we already do. We are stewards. We do try to do things the right way. And I think this is just going to accelerate that process for us. And we're gonna know that we can do more with less.
Thank you, Jesse. Matt, would you like to chime in?
Well, Jesse, I'm glad to hear you were stressing over this last question too, because I was like, what am I going to say on this? I mean, we both work for a local or a state government. So in terms of the budget, at least I'm used to being ready to justify every one of my purchases. So in terms of what's going on now, really hasn't changed that much. But in terms of what I've learned, I mentioned that I made a mistake in a nozzle choice. I was using too high of a flow of nozzle with a non-selective, and I knew better, but we were trying to get pre-emergent down in a non-selective at the same time, and the two of them just don't work based on what I chose. So I'm going back to what I've done in the past, which always worked. So it forced us to try to experiment a little bit. The biggest thing I've noticed is we've had the technology for a year now. We have some very high, expensive tablets that all of my leads have, but we're in bad habits of being tied to our office. Instead of when you're in the field, you want to be doing something productive in the field with your hands. And when you come back to the office, that's when you get on the computer. Well, this has all forced us. Our computers are in our vehicles now. I'm sitting on a field on a tablet now, and it kind of forced us to use our technology. It forced us to hold some Zoom meetings with landscapers, which would have been probably unheard of 6 months ago with my staff. So, and I mentioned that two of my crews are meeting remotely. I've been mauling that for 2 years, but for the fact we didn't have a time clock, which cost $3,000 sitting out there, and the fact that they would not be seen, the staff just proved that they all can work on their own. They know what they need to get done. With a little guidance, they can do some amazing things. So it's really pushed us out of our comfort level in a good way, and it showed what we really can do with the tools that we have in place.
I like that, Matt. I like the fact that you're learning what the strengths are with your individual crew members and staff. Also had written down early on that going to the 10-hour shifts was a benefit to a lot of your crew, and maybe moving forward that might be something that you consider, because it does make them more efficient as far as their work days go and allow them to do other things. I know when my brother worked for the city of Virginia Beach, they had their crews split up in half, and they worked 10 hours, and each crew would get a 3-day weekend. So one crew would work Monday through Thursday, and then the next crew would work Tuesday through Friday. So it enabled those crews to have more time at home or more time doing their side job. So sounds like something that you've learned through this process too.
Absolutely.
I'd like to lean on Dr. Goatley, throughout your experience and what we're going through this year. What have you seen across all the turf industry as making us better in different ways of handling this pandemic?
I think once the reality set in that this was serious, and Matt and Jesse have both alluded to this morning, is that I've seen a lot of folks that took it serious and they started planning for the worst while hoping for the best. And that still to this day is kind of what I think is the smartest philosophy to choose. I'd tell everyone to think about, remember, this is going top to bottom. Think about how this also impacts the vendors that you work with, because we're all living in our situations and they're part of this thing too. And they also have got to keep bread on the table. So figure out how can you continue to support your colleagues from that side of the industry. And something that both of my colleagues did a great job, and just Matt just talked about it here. Look at how this has improved the communication between your employees, the possibilities now to communicate better with the public, with your supervisors, with your clientele. It's forced us into making some steps that we probably otherwise don't even think of. And my last comment is, if Jesse's got a 60-year-old guy that can climb an 8-foot fence, he should hire that guy when this thing lifts. I've got a hard enough time getting in and out of my bathtub. So my hat's off to that.
Well, guys, I appreciate y'all participating today, and it's been a great experience thus far. And there's one person I have not recognized, and that's Whitney Askew from Virginia Tech, who is not letting us see her on the screen, but she is working in the background to provide us information and support us. And Whitney, thank you for doing this. I was hoping that you could share any questions that might have arose through this process so that we can go over that with these guys.
We have not gotten any yet, so I think you guys must have did a great job covering everything.
Well, and everybody out there, I want to let them know that we are all a resource for our membership, as well as anybody in the sports turf industry, and certainly want to be there to support them. This is all the contact information, and I want to thank the speakers today who have each been a resource to you. So I'm going to throw this out there. Please reach out to us, give us some calls, let us know how we can help you. We're all in this together, and I know a lot of people are struggling out there with jobs and everything else. I'm there for everybody, and I know Jesse, Matt, and Dr. Goatley are available too. So with that, I guess we can wrap it up for today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Excellent job.
Thank you.